Hi there and welcome back to the CKM Red Rugby League channel. Ready for another round preview of the Super League. Round 7 been and gone now. On to round 8, a couple of crackers in round 7. As ever, Oliver from Rugby League, in my opinion, is here. How are you going, mate?
I'm doing pretty well, man. I'm ready to get stuck into everything. We've got 5 games of the Super League we're here to talk about coming up, and I can't wait.
I know. Before we get into it, worthwhile mentioning 70% of you watching this video are not subscribed to the channel right now. It would be a massive help if you did turn that button grey for us and subscribe. It's absolutely free and it helps the channel no end, as well as heading over to Oliver's channel, Rugby League, in my opinion, giving that a sub as well, giving all his socials a lot of love. And with that, we will jump straight into the first game. It is the Tigers versus the Dragons. Castleford are they're going well. They are one of the form teams in the competition at the minute. Worthwhile mentioning, though, that one of their losses in their last 5 did come against their opponents this week, the Catalans. They are red hot at the minute, but Catalans, they're not doing too well overseas with a loss this week against St Helens. It's a tough ask.
Yeah, I can't really go past Castleford in this one. As you said, the Catalans got the win over them last time. However, I feel like coming off against that pretty big loss against St Helens and the form that Castleford have been in, I think that they've got what it takes to get the victory in this one. And if Castleford are going to be a side that's really pushing for sort of top 2, top 3, I would say then this is a game they have to be winning, especially with a Catalan side who has just come off of such a big loss.
Yeah, and it's worthwhile going to the stats as well. Castleford currently the biggest meter makers in Super League, 9,310, as well as they lead the stats for the most clean breaks as well. And you saw that Catalans really did struggle against that fast play, the 6 again rule, really putting them on their heels. And Castleford are a team that can expose that. Truman, Richardson, McShane, that spine is absolutely sensational. They will just pick up and go, and they will punish a slow line.
Yeah, well, you look at a guy like Paul McShane as well. He's currently leading the Man of Steel race. I believe he could be tied with Aiden Caesar, but he's definitely first. So he'll want to be kicking on. He'll want to be getting back off to a good start, and he's sort of got a lead for Castleford here. But as I said, I just think it's going to be too one-sided. I know the Catalans before the break were in some solid form as well, but I just can't see them overcoming the odds here against the Castleford Tigers, who, as I said, really should be winning this one if they are to be a sort of top 3 side in 2020.
Yeah, and Catalans, it could go for and against them, the fact that they did play on Sunday, because they've got that rust out of them now. They've got used to the contact again. Your body very quickly gets used to not being hit by somebody else. So whereas Catalans have had that week and now will have a week off, Castleford now have to try and shake that rust off real quick, get straight back out there and take on a pretty physical Catalan side that be fired up from a loss as well. We've got the last 5 meetings going across the bottom there. You'll see coming up now, Catalan's last win against Castleford in the UK, September 2nd, 2012. Castleford in the UK are a real bogey team against them. Catalans, they're notorious for not travelling well. In France, it's an absolute fortress. But when they've got to come over here, they've got the travel, all the new restrictions and all the new checks. It's going to take it out of them.
Yeah, 100%. As I said last week, I feel like this break, if you had to pick any Super League team that's going to be impacted by it the most, you can't go past the Catalan Dragons. It's pretty much for the reasons you just brought up. I honestly, it's hard because of the form they were in to start the season, but I think we could see the Catalans go through a poor patch of form, and especially, just based off of that last game, although they were up against the defending champions, that it should have been a closer game, again, based off of that form that the Catalans have been in. However, I just can't see them really picking back up, at least not until a bit further on in the season. I definitely can't see them doing it this week against the Castleford Tigers. Wouldn't be surprised if it's not an absolute flogging, or if it's not similar to St Helens victory. However, I think Castleford should win this one pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards a Castleford win of 10 plus. I think the Catalans will have shored up their defence a little, but I can see them potentially hanging with them for a little while. But as the game really kicks on, I can see just that explosive speed and the ruck speed of McShane just speeding the game right up and taking Catalans out of it. So with that, then we will go to our next game. It is Warrington versus Hull KR, two teams that are yet to be seen since the resumption. Both will be benefiting from a bit of a rest, get some bodies back. Warrington they're very hard to call in 2020. They go for a 9-8 win against Castleford and a 36-0 loss against Leeds. It's really hard to see which Warrington team is really going to turn up. I mean, those two teams that we did mention there, you expect them to be sort of top 5, top 4 come the end of the season based on how they're travelling. But you'd expect Warrington to be doing better with the calibre of recruitment that they've brought in and just how well they present themselves too.
100%. And you know what, I think after that 38-4 win, Warrington were sort of really looking up, of course, against Hull FC. COVID's put a real big halt to that, at least for a couple of months. I think they should be able to come back all right. However, if they are a bit rusty, if there's any team you sort of want to be going up against in your first game back, with all due respect, it's against Hull KR at the moment, who are obviously now at the bottom of the ladder. I can't see Hull KR winning this one, especially I know that you said that Warrington have been a bit up and down, but I think it's still safe to say that they should get the win here against Hull KR. I would be very surprised if Hull KR won. I'm just going to go with Warrington with this one. As you said, the recruitment, the players that they've got, on paper at least, it's one of the best sides we've seen in a while in terms of recruitment from Australia. I think they've brought in sort of, the best quality Australian players. And I'm generalizing here. I think they've made that best recruitment. And I can't see them losing this one. Yeah, as you said, they may be a bit rusty. It may be a bit gritty, a bit dirty. We may not see the best Warrington Wolves side in this game. However, they are, with all due respect, going up against Hull KR. Yeah.
It's worthwhile noticing as well when you go to the stats that Hull KR right now have the most missed tackles in Super League, which is a real problem when you come up against a Warrington side that currently has the most offloads in Super League with 115. But Warrington have also got the most errors with 83. But an even more interesting stat out of that is that both Hull KR and Warrington have scored 84 points apiece this season. So attacking, they're travelling about the same. But you look at the teams that they've played. I mean, they've both played Hull FC. It's going to be a real interesting one because Hull KR, you've seen it. They've got an upset in them. They've got the ability to run a team close. So it was 30 points to 16 against Wigan. 22-4, 25. It's real tough. 25-16 loss against Hull FC. They have the ability to show up against some of the high caliber teams in Super League, but it's just a case of, is it their day? I can't see Warrington. I can't look past Warrington at this point. I think they've got some bodies back, and they should go relatively well here.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. The Red Devils take on Hull FC, last year's grand finalists, of course, Salford. It's been a pretty up and down start to the 2020 for them. Of course, they've lost a few key players. They're set to lose a couple more, as well as Niall Olds is now going to Castleford at the end of the season. It's tough for Salford because it seems that every single year they undergo a spine change. It seems that last year was their best iteration of it. And in 2020, they're still not getting used to it with one win in their last 5, that coming against Wigan, and a very narrow win. They've played some tough teams, but you'd expect that they'd be they'd be doing better for a team that did make the big dance last year.
Yeah, 100%. With these 5 games that we're looking over today, this one would have to be the hardest for me to pick. Now, Salford have definitely been underperforming, but they do have the ability to play well. Jackson Hastings might have been the best player in that Salford team last season, but he definitely wasn't, the sole man, especially a team that gets to a grand final. However, Hull FC, right before the break, we saw Lee Radford, be publicly fired, pretty much. Which was just crazy scenes. Hull haven't really been performing up to the standard that I guess they should be, at least on paper. So this one's really surprising for me. This one, both teams, I guess, will be expecting to win. And I know you go into every game expecting to win and wanting to win, but if either of these teams are going to really turn their season around and make a push for that sort of top 5, I feel like this is a game they'll both be looking to win, and both that they'll sort of see as a must-win game. Because for both of them, they have been performing subpar. I know that Hull FC are currently above Salford, so it is very hard for me to pick. However, I am going to go purely sort of, for me, off paper here, and I'm going to go with Hull FC. But you know what, I think it'll be sort of between 8 to 12 points. But yeah, this one was really hard for me to pick, and honestly, if it goes the other way, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got the stats going across the bottom there of the last 5 meetings. It's a pretty even split. I mean, Hull FC taking 3 of the last 5. There've been a few big score lines in there as well. It's going to be a tough one to pick. As worth noting, Salford currently have the lowest scored points in Super League, only registering 70 points, whereas Hull FC have they've done a better job of finding the line, but it's going to be tricky. Hull FC are struggling, as well as Salford. Only 1 win in their last 5. Last night as well, Scott Taylor taking to Twitter to announce that he'll miss the resumption of the season through injury. That's about as much injury news as we do have out of the Hull FC camp right now, but he will be a huge loss to their forward pack, because at the minute, Hull FC are leading the tackle bust stats with 279. They also have the second best average gain in Super League. So they're very good at getting down the other end of the field. At the minute, it's kind of their defence that's letting them down. I mean, you look at the losses that they've suffered against Warrington, against St Helens, and Catalans in France as well. It's as well as Wigan. It's pretty bleak for Hull. But if they were to take anything away from that, you've got 3 of the top 5 teams in Super League in there, as well as Catalans in France, who are undoubtedly, we mentioned it in the last game, they're one of the hardest teams to knock off at home. So I wouldn't read too much into that, but I do think that there's going to be plenty of points in this one. Hull exceeding 30 points in most of their games against Salford. So I'm going to lean towards quite a few points being scored, as well as Hull taking probably it's going to be about a 6 to 12 point win here, because I can see Salford hanging with them for this.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I couldn't agree more.
Okay, with that then, we will move on to the next one. It is Wakefield Trinity against the Wigan Warriors. Both teams are incredibly hard to read in 2020. Wakefield have the ability to stun teams on their day, whereas Wigan have been very, very good, but have come up with some surprising losses. The 16-12 loss against the Castleford Tigers, and even more so the 18 to 14 points loss against Salford. Wakefield Trinity, 27-26 in their last game against Hull FC. They've lost to Castleford as well as that opening day loss to Hull KR. It's hard to call this one, because Wakefield, as I just said, they do have an upset in them out of absolutely nowhere. But it's very hard to look past Wigan when they're Super League's top try scorers. They love to make a break through the middle. They've got players with a lot of pace as well. Powell, Bevan French, Jackson Hastings, who are going to relish this 6 again rule, because they're players that basically play off speed. They love a quick play of the ball and to catch teams on their heels.
Yeah. Before I get into this game, I recently conducted an interview with Oliver Gildart over on my channel, Rugby League, My Opinion. I asked him about his current injury situation. He said he still should be about 4 weeks off. If it wasn't for COVID, he probably would have been back already, but due to that, rehab sort of been stuffed up a bit there. So he said around 4 weeks. So he will be back before the end of the season. Warriors fans. Now on to this game. Look, on paper, the Warriors should take it. I'm going to go with the Warriors, but you look at Wakefield, a couple of upsets in them, like that game against Warrington sort of earlier in the year. And also they've got a couple of games in hand on some teams. So if they can get a couple of wins these next couple of weeks, they are looking pretty good. They are looking like they could sort of get into that top 5 and maybe surprise a few people. This will be a game, if they can get an upset, that'll really assist that. However, I can't see Wigan losing this one based on the form they had before the break. They were top of the table, of course. Leeds are now on for and against. So I am going to have to go with Wigan here to reclaim that top spot on the ladder and to say to everyone, hey, even though we've had this break, we are still as good as we were before.
Yeah. The Wigan Warriors are a class act. We mentioned some of the players that they've got there. They've got some handy depth in them too. Likely Chris Hankinson will come in and fill that centre spot. It's going to be a big ask for Wakefield to come up with points here. I don't think that we're going to blow them out. I think that Wakefield will have benefited from the rest as well, and they'll have a point to prove after. Realistically, somewhat up and down start. They'll be disappointed with some of the results that they did pick up, but I can see Wakefield hanging with them. As you mentioned, it's been a long time coming. A lot of people have said, Wakefield will make the top 4, and it has eluded them for so many years. If Wakefield can find up some of those issues, there's no reason why they aren't a top 4 team. They've got quality all over the field. Tom Johnston, a player that I know really well, is still going well. He's 5 tries this season. Ben Jones Bishop hanging around on the other wing. Tupou's going to be out there as well. It's going to be a big ask for Wigan on the edges, because that's where Wakefield really thrive. I think that if Wigan stick to their game plan of going up the guts and looking for those errors in and around the play the ball area and those lazy markers, I think Wigan could potentially put up a scoreline, but I can see that Wakefield could drag them back into this arm wrestle. I'm going to say Wigan by no more than a converted try, realistically, for this one.
Oh, I think Wigan probably will win by a bit more, but I feel like Wakefield will sort of hang around in this one. I'll say a 6-14 point margin. But, the thing for me as well, as I said before, the position that Wakefield currently are in on the ladder, a couple of games in hand, and they'll be looking to win those games, because if they do, they'll be up there with the best in the competition. So it'll be hard for Wigan. It won't be as easy as I guess it seems on paper. However, I think Wigan probably still should get the victory here.
Yeah. Worthwhile noting as well, for anyone that is on the pump for that game, only one of their last 5 meetings has not exceeded 40 points. So back the over 40 on this one, because there's going to be points. It's just a case of who actually gets them. So with that, we will move on to probably the toughest game of this round to call. The Rhinos, of course, were in action over the weekend, bagging that thrilling comeback against Huddersfield in a game that they had absolutely no right to win, but it's just indicative of a Leeds Rhinos never say die attitude. But they do come up against St Helens, who, it's got to be said, did look like they were back to their best against Catalans, benefiting from that break, getting players back. Matt Percival back from injury, Lachlan Coote bagging some points as well, 18 points overall. St Helens are incredibly hard to look past, even based on the fact that they did have a bit of a clunky start to the season. Coming up against Leeds, who are currently top of the table, have got points in them. They're currently the highest point scorers in Super League. It's a big ask, realistically.
It is a big ask, and I'm going to have to go with the champions here, especially based off of that last game, the performance they put in against the Catalans, who were in form before the break. I know St Helens haven't gotten off to the best start. However, I think they'll still be there when the whips are cracking at the end of the season, as will the Leeds Rhinos. However, I think in this one in particular, the Leeds Rhinos did have to sort of grind out that victory, come back against the Huddersfield Giants, where it was just a really easy win for St Helens. And, before the break, the Catalans and Huddersfield weren't too far apart in terms of, how they were playing and their form. So I guess for me, that's sort of, I guess, showing a bit of a difference, whereas Leeds can still just grind out a victory and win. St Helens can put sides to the sword, and they're definitely not going to put Leeds to the sword here, but I think they have what it takes to get that victory. As he said last week, the other day, Lachlan Coote coming out and returning, putting in that performance. I believe he got 3 tries as well. I think just overall, St Helens have the better side, and that's why they're the champions too. So I feel like the Saints will get this one. However, if Leeds win, again, it's not going to be a huge surprise. I just think Saints are probably a better chance in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Rhinos fan myself, so I realistically have to back my own side. But I think even so, I'd lean towards the Rhinos. I mean, although Saints have won 4 of the last 5 meetings, and Leeds haven't won against Saints at Headingley since August 2017, I think Leeds are trying to make Headingley that fortress again. It's a tough one. This one is a really tough one, because if Leeds play like they did for the majority of the game against Huddersfield, Leeds are on the back end of a similar scoreline to what Catalans suffered. If Leeds play like they did in the last 15 minutes against Huddersfield, Saints it's going to be ropey for them, because Leeds, once they got firing, once that confidence came back, they looked absolutely unstoppable. And as I said, they had absolutely no right to win that game. But the mark of a good team is being able to still grab a win despite playing poorly. And Leeds, for the most part, were absolutely awful. Plenty of calls of obstruction, passes going to ground. Darnell McIntosh's hat-trick try coming off basically a pass that went to ground. It just set up kindly for him, and he went the field. And for the most part of that Leeds comeback as well, they were down to 12 men with Ash Handley being in the sin bin. So it's hard to call. This one's really, really difficult to call. But as a Rhinos fan, I do have to back my own team. But that's definitely not underestimating St Helens and their ability, because they are, as you saw, when they start moving the ball and they start going through the gears, they're a side with points in them, and they are a side to be feared again in 2020 if they continue the way that they did.
100%.
Yeah. So with that, then, that looks like the end for us for Super League's preview for round 8. It's been a fun one. I always enjoy chatting with yourself, mate. It's been a really, really good one to film. Check out all his socials, give him all the love. They will all be linked in the description on YouTube, in the comments on Facebook as well. Go check out Rugby League, in my opinion, and go watch that Oliver Gildart interview as well. Really, really interesting. Get some interesting insights. He does allude a little bit to his future, about whether there is an NRL contract on the table. So go check it out. And thanks again for joining us, mate.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me. Anytime.
No. And we will see you ready to preview round 9. We'll see you then. Bye. Bye.
See you then.